Hey man, so a lot of great things that we can work on here. What I'm really focusing on, so find that last little bit, right? Like there's not a second and a half for us to find. It's gonna be little bits of low-hanging fruit. What I'm gonna show you here is it's all about executing, but be very specific. If you were to combine your two laps together, I think you actually have a good chunk of time left on the table. So there's not this coaching session is going to be less about, hey, let's change this all together versus showing you, hey, this is what you did well on this lap. This is what we did well on this lap. We'll show in a little bit of data as well. I know the data isn't from this session, is from a slower lap, but I think it's going to highlight a couple things in turn six, especially for you to give priorities on what to focus on. So what we're going to see first here, I'm going to go kind of corner by corner and change lap to lap, is your 46 lap, you did a better job through this turn 1-2 section. So what I'm gonna highlight is a couple areas. So coming into turn one here, first off, notice how you're all the way to the right side of the road. And what that does is when you come up and apex this left-hander, you are apexing it just past the start of this curve. And then importantly here is, notice where the car is at the end of this curve on your left-hand side. You are pretty much all the way along the left-hand side of the road. So the next lap here, let me back this up just a little bit. What I want to show you here is this is the faster lap, but I think it's slower through this section. See how much further away you are from that right-hand side of the road? So what ends up happening is when you apex here, see how you're apexing just subtly earlier. It's not a big difference, but it's a tiny bit earlier. But then importantly is at the end of the curve, notice how now you're more than a tire width closer to the inside of the road. The next area of difference is we don't get quite as close to the inside here. We are just ever so slightly wider. And this lap, we have a bit of a moment trying to get to throttle. Now, it's probably later in the session. I know that you skipped forward a little bit in the video. I don't know how much farther. I don't think tires are to blame through here. I think that subtle difference back, whoops, first difference here in turn one being tighter in means you're having to turn more, where apex is just slightly earlier, where because of that slightly more the inside here tightens up the radius. We miss this apex by a tiny, tiny little bit. We have probably a little bit more steering input, and then we have this moment trying to get to throttle. So going back to the previous lap here, once again, apexing slightly later. Look how much closer we are to that curb, more than a tire width closer. And then once again, see how we're tighter in here. Look how much closer you are to the curb at the start of it. That seems to be working for you. So let's get this lap, this line consistent every time, because what ends up happening is as you get the throttle, yeah, you have a little bit of an understeer, but that's fine. It's costing you less time than that slide on exit in these cars. That's going to be more important for you. So really focus on that line through here. Turn 3A, 3B, 4. I didn't notice that big of a difference each lap. I think we look pretty solid through here. Let me just back this up. Let's take a look. Whoops. One time through here. So this lap, we are turning in before the end of the curve on our right-hand side. I would say that's slightly early, but let's go ahead, look at the faster lap through here. Okay, 3A, 3B. Let's see, where are we turning in this time? This time we're turning in a little bit later. So I like the line on the 145 lap. See how now we're at the end of the curve before we're turning in? That's what I want to see every time. I think that way we're better. We're a little bit closer to the left-hand side of the road here before turning back to the right, probably rolling more speed up over the top of the hill. So again, another subtle difference that we're not consistent with that we want to get consistent with. Turn 4, I thought we looked pretty solid both laps. I know we had one moment, I think, on the previous lap. That looks overall pretty good. So into turn 6, I know that was one of those areas where you said, I feel like I'm losing a little bit of time. This is where I want to show you what I looked at on the data. So again, on the data, this isn't going to be the same 2 laps, but I think you're going to see something here that is really going to give you a clear direction on what we want to focus on. So we've got red lap and green lap. The red lap is slightly faster, but you were actually slower than the green lap going into turn 6. So what we're looking at here is this graph here in the middle is speed. This top one is your longitudinal acceleration. So think about this as your brake curve and throttle curve. As the curve comes down, you're slowing the car down. As the curve starts to go back up, you're speeding up. And then where you see this kind of flat line is probably because you're at full throttle and you're not really accelerating as fast. At the bottom here, we have our time delta. So you can see you went from being 3.5 tenths slower to 3 tenths faster. So sorry, to a half a tenth faster. So it's 4 tenths of time gain here. And what we're looking at is on the right lap, you broke a little bit later, but, and that could be for a myriad of reasons. But what I'm really focused in on is you really broke lighter as well. You were less aggressive with your initial brake application, and your peak brake pressure was quite a lot lower as well. Because of that, you rolled a lot more speed over the top of the hill, 10 kilometers an hour faster. And what you're going to see here is the green lap, you tried to get back to throttle earlier. You got back to throttle, you had to lift off of it, and then you both laps got back to full throttle at nearly the same point. So by the end, you're almost identical. You got back to full throttle at almost the same point. Your minimum speed in the corner is 2 kilometers different. So very much not a big deal. So where the time game comes in turn 6, and what I want you to really focus in on, is that lighter and longer brake zone through the first apex. Really focusing on entry speed, entry speed, entry speed, middle corner speed, and then you'll get back to, don't care about your minimum speed, don't care as much about where you get back to full throttle. Both of those areas keep consistent. Really focus on that lighter brake zone, rolling speed down the hill, and you can see that's where the time game's coming right now. As long as it's not really hurting you on exit. So I want you to sort of pick the point of, this is where I need to get back to throttle, this is where I'm going to get back to full throttle, and then work on braking lighter, lighter to roll speed down. And as soon as you start to not being able to execute on those points of, this is where I need to get to throttle, this is where I need to get back to full throttle, you're over the limit. And you know, as soon as you start going wide, then you back it down a little bit. Now we're getting closer to the limit of the car as you drop down the hill in turn 6. So this is the one area where I thought, even using different laps, it's a good thing to highlight for you using the data. So let's go back to the video here. So into turn 6, really focus on light, super light on the brakes, super light on the brakes. I like that you know, if you can get down to that apex, great, but I'd rather see you focus on rolling and entry speed. And if you miss the apex all the way through, it's kind of like, who the hell cares? We don't need to be perfectly to the left side of the road alongside this curve right now. This lap, you focused on rolling speed and getting back to full throttle versus being perfect. And I think that actually is a benefit for you. So there's some corners where you've got to be perfectly on the apex, turn 3 at Laguna Seca. Some corners where if you miss it a little bit because you're rolling in more entry speed or because you're getting back to full throttle earlier, it's still a benefit for you. Turn 7, wide difference between our two lines. So let's go back to the first lap. Well, that was a lucky guess. Look at your line in turn 7 this lap. So see how wide of the first apex we go before we turn in? We use more track in here, but we really missed that first apex more than I'd like to see. So let's see our faster lap in here. Let's take a look through turn 7. Notice how everything's the same here, but we have an earlier, lighter steering input here, which means you can roll more speed. The first lap where you turn later more aggressively, the more aggressive you turn in, the slower you have to go. So while we don't really care that much, like I want to see you use the track in the middle of the corner, by turning in earlier, by getting in closer in here, you can turn in slower so you can roll more speed. And I think there's something in between these two laps that is what we're looking for. So this lap, we don't use as much road out to our left-hand side. We've got a little bit more steering input than I'd like to see in here. So what I'm looking for is more of the line on this lap, but I think there's even a little bit more entry speed we can roll in here, roll it in, roll it in, roll it in, roll it in, maybe taking you just a tiny bit wider before coming back. Subtlety, but more this lap. Through this next kind of 8, 8, 9, 10 section, you look awesome. Both laps were consistent. Both laps look really good. Love that you're holding it left here, back to the right. Good apex here. You're using all the track on exit. There's probably a little bit more for you available, but slowly work up to that one. I don't think there's much on the table through here. I think you look great. Good turning point, good apex, using the road on exit. Awesome. On your 45.7 lap, I think you probably lost 2 or 3 tenths alone here in turn 11. Let's take a look at this. That snap, if it really sounds like we're starting to pick up the throttle and then it snaps. So I'm going to turn the volume up again. It's not going to sound great on your end. I'm going to try to pause it where I hear that throttle come in. So I start to hear that throttle now, and then see how soon after that it snaps. I think you were at the limit of the car, and if you were just slightly more patient, wait, and now got the throttle, you would have avoided this big moment, and you would have picked up 2 3 tenths. So I think what I'd like to see is your line on this lap looked good. We just weren't. Whoops. Let me back this up a little bit more. We just needed to be slightly more patient to throttle. That initial throttle came before the car was ready for it. You're at the limit. You're at the limit. You picked it up, and then you just kind of dumped. It was too much for the tires to take. Here, just a little bit more patience, pick the throttle now. You would have avoided all of this. Back to full throttle. You would have avoided the speed loss from that slide, which really is a big negative in this car and at that speed. And that would have been the 2 tenths you're looking for. So see how we're not looking for wholesale changes here? We're looking to clean up things. And if we can combine those 2 laps together, there's a good chunk of time. Now we just got to consistently do that. So let's go back to the previous lap and take a look at turn 11 here. So this time, we kind of had more of a later apex attempt here. You kind of went straighter here, and then we stayed out wide and then really try to crank it in at the end here. But see how much road you've got out to your left-hand side? So we don't need as late of an apex. I'd like to see you apex more this third tire stack. And right now, where you're sort of adding steering input, I would like to see you start to let the car be free, and be all the way out to the wall right now. So that subtly earlier apex here, let the car be free at this point versus adding steering input. And now we've got kind of the ideal line through this section. So hopefully that makes sense. You know, you can always call me, email me, or we can get together and talk about this more in person. And then as we start to get the data figured out more, we can bring that more and more into this, and I can be more confident when I'm looking at this. So as always, appreciate all your help with everything we're doing. Hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully you kick some ass this year, and look forward to seeing you winning some races.